credit card.
The
Wouldn't take my
microphone.
dollar.
That's how expensive the soda is these days with your credit card.
Yeah, apparently.
Conspiracy.
It is.
Under what?
A conspiracy to keep me from my Dr.
It's
Pepper.
here. No, it's a good thing. It's.
I don't think I've ever done that. I would have just left.
I can't remember where. She's
Yeah.
sneaking it into there.
Carrie, if you want me to
Oh,
buy
maybe
soda,
she's just
I'm getting nervous when I'm missing.
Can you tape recorders on?
Yeah, that's when you know it's bad. I need a credit card to buy a freaking soda.
Greg, are you ready?
Greg,
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Call this meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance. Roll call, please, Twyla.
Yes, Council Garrison,
Present.
Council Lunt,
here.
Council McTevier,
Here.
Council Bickford,
Yeah.
Council Ward,
Here.
Council Pesky,
Here.
Council Brunel.
Here.
And the next item.
Is good news and recognition.
Councilors?
I'll quickly just recognize Mark Stevens for all his hard work with the wrestling. I know this was his last year with coaching wrestling, and great job to Mark Stevens, and thank you for everything you did for Lisbon.
Definitely. I had the opportunity to go to a meeting with the folks at the Career Center this week, and it was all good news. The program has been working out well. It's received support from other programs of its type in Lewiston, Auburn, and everything looks extremely positive, and we've seen some good results out of it already. So it's just they've done a great job over there at the library, and the librarians have really embraced the extra training so that they can help their patrons better, and everybody's benefited from it. And everyone's very anxious to move forward with the program into the future. So that was a great meeting. Anybody else?
I'd like to just say thanks to all the plow truck drivers who did a great job keeping the roads passable on Monday morning when I think we all saw how icy and nasty it was out there. And I want to thank those guys for all they've done all winter long. It's been one of the hardest winters I can ever remember. So keep up the good work, guys.
Okay, the next item, please, Twyla.
There are no public hearings, so it'll be audience participation. At this time, those in the audience who wish to address the council may come forward to address items or issues that are on the agenda. Please use the microphone at the lectern and state your name and your address for the record.
Larry Fillmore from Lisbon. Our current council working rules has the cart before the horse. Currently, the public is asked to address agenda items before the sponsor has had a chance to explain the reason for the change. Also, the public has not had an opportunity to hear how the councilors feel about the proposed change. There is a chance that if a resident understood the purpose of the change and how the councilors felt, there'd be no need to speak. The public is required to speak during public participation without the benefit of understanding the issue. If the council eliminated the public participation and allowed the people to speak after hearing the sponsor and the council's decision, the dialogue could be more positive. The time allotted for the public to speak would be the same, so it's not going to add any additional time to the meetings. In fact, it may even speed up the meeting time because the sponsor or the counselor may provide information that would answer the residents' concerns or questions. Please consider allowing the people to speak after hearing the sponsor explain the change and hearing the counselor's concerns and discussions. Thank you.
Any other?
Madam Chairman, Dr. Fitzgerald, Lisbon Falls. On November 3rd, 2009, the town voted a $320,000 bond in order to receive $1.2 million matching funds from the Maine Department of Transportation for the construction of the final phase of the Lisbon Trail System. This is a total of $1,520,000, and I probably should have waited to bring this up at a budget meeting, but there's not always time to ask a question after a budget meeting. At a previous meeting, Town Engineer Ryan Layton mentioned that the town needs to raise and appropriate an additional $20,000 plus $5,500. The $5,500 is a Department of Transportation trail match, and the $20,000 is also a Department of Transportation trail match for the same trail. When we've already budgeted one, this trail is already costing over $1.5 million. I'd like to know how much has been spent on this trail, how much do we have left, and can't the town engineer department find somewhere in this over $1.5 million to come up with this $25,500 rather than coming back to the taxpayers again this year and asking for more money? Kind of on another thing, roads is on everybody's mind today. I was on the Webster Road Sunday afternoon, and I was also on the Bodenham Road Sunday afternoon. Saturday evening, I was on the Ferry Road from Pine Woods to Miller Road. All three roads are absolutely atrocious. We need to start putting money into our roads. And this is only three of, I don't know how many. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay.
First of all,
Name.
Dean Willie, Lisbon Falls. That's not on. Dean Willie, Lisbon Falls. First, wanted to apologize to the board or town council for my actions the last time I was here. Stormed off. I'm very sorry for that. That was out of character. Second, I would like just to make a statement. It's not really a question. It's concerning the bond issues that you guys have before you tonight. Colonel Rochelle said a while ago when we were discussing the plans for the town that unless you invest in what you have, you'll never get any better than it is. The plans, propositions, and ideas being discussed for capital improvements do exactly what we should be doing: invest in our town's future. The rejuvenation of the schools, its infrastructure and facilities will not only bring families and businesses to the town of Lisbon and Lisbon Falls, it will produce much needed return on investment, which will allow families from out of town to see and use businesses already here. For families considering Lisbon as a potential home, they will view us as a town that is eager to invest in our children and that we take pride in our schools. These investments will almost immediately bring funds back to the town that has been steadily flowing out to our neighboring towns. The school committee and Mr. Green have, in my opinion, done an admirable job by keeping existing programs despite unfunded requirements and state cuts. These plans help sustain the programs where resources are short and non-existent. Additionally, they have done their due diligence with reference to the capital improvements. As I have said before, the way I see it is that we are at a fork in the road again. The left fork allows us to continue down the path where we pay continuously rising taxes for almost nothing in return, equally allowing infrastructure to deteriorate, crumble, and remain unsuitable, where eventually there will be much bigger debts to repay and fewer people to pay them. Alternatively, we can take the right fork and start down a new path to a new town that invests intelligently, not foolishly. A town that invests in its future, invests in its children, invests in its schools. A town that provides opportunities to its citizens and allows them to take advantage of the offerings. It does seem like a damned if you do and damned if you don't situation. Nevertheless, as I see it, there is much more upside to the school projects and infrastructure improvements than the downside. Yes, there will need to be bonds floated. On the other hand, the downside is much more hard-hearted, where the population of Lisbon and Lisbon Falls will continue down the left fork.
Thank you, Mr. Willie. Anyone else?
Steve Warren from Lisbon. Just want to follow up and address the previous meeting brought up some questions. People were expressing the sentiment of not in my backyard, which is common, understandable. And there were also questions about the role of the Trails Commission, commissions in general, that sort of thing. And I think it's important to clarify who, first off, how government in Maine, municipal government functions, for people to understand who are not involved in this on a regular basis, that we have a town council form of government where ultimately the authority lies, and they appoint people, or in some cases they're elected boards and committees, and then you have the municipal, the administrative side. And people need to understand that the committees are appointed or elected, but they do not work for the administrator. In fact, they need to represent the community, and they need to have the culture of the community in mind in the programs that they undertake. The administrative staff has the role of carrying on the day-to-day business, and they're professional, so they have a job to do, and they will continue to do their job very competently once they find something that works to stay with that. The role of the committee is not to be directed by the staff person or the administration, but to reflect the culture of the community. So that's what the Trails Commission is there for, that's what the Library Board is there for, that's what the Conservation Commission is there for. People may not understand this, but we are there to reflect the character of the community, and that's why we look for input, and we welcome it, and we, in a lot of cases, put things forward, perhaps before the administrative staff or other people are maybe fully endorsing them, because that's our job, to represent the people.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Hi.
Kathy Yergin, Lisbon Falls. I just want to agree with Mr. Fillmore. I have had a lot of rumors floating around for the past 3 or 4 days, and I have a lot of comments I would love to say, but I would rather hear your opinion first. So for me to sit here and just come out and say something just doesn't seem right. So if you moved audience participation to the end, it would help all these people to find out what you guys are thinking. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Marcy Seeger, Lisbon, Marcy Crosskill. I just wanted to make sure that everyone in the room today was aware, and I'm sure you are, that the school committee did vote in favor to move forward with our capital improvement bonds on our June referendum versus the November one. The reason for that is because we were listening to the public and our community. We had informational nights that explained how we were going to go about making this work, what the bonds may look like. Mr. Green has had incredible information distributed to the community. And based on the amount of public support that we got from that, and phone calls, emails, social media, it was decided by the school committee that we would move forward and put that on the June referendum. So I'm in front of you tonight hoping that you will definitely take that into consideration, that this is based on what we feel our school needs to improve and for our students, but also because the community spoke and we listened to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcy.
Welsh, Lisbon. I only have one question for today. I've noticed over the years that the school has suffered dramatically. When my son goes to pick a class, there's really not too many classes to pick from, or one advanced class is only offered one time a day. So I feel like that's just one example. Over the years, the schools have suffered. I believe that the schools' teacher salaries have been frozen in the past, yet the town salaries have not. I may be incorrect. So the point that I'm getting to is really this. As I stated, that schools have suffered for probably the last 5 years. I know that taxes have increased every year, including last year, and I believe last year taxes weren't supposed to go up, and I may be once again wrong. You guys can all give me the facts, I guess, today. So my question is, how much of our tax increases every year, in particular last year and the year before, have gone to the school side, and what percentage have gone to the town side? I feel like the town, we've been kind of nurturing the town, kind of pretty much giving the town, you can comment in a minute, that's why I'm here, because I'm not sure, I'd like to know the facts. As I stated, I've witnessed the school suffering dramatically, things being cut, salaries being frozen, so, and yet I see my taxes go up every year. So how much of the tax increases, for example, last year and the year before, have gone to the school side versus the town side? I really believe that at this point in time, it's time to reinvest in our school.
Oh, wake up.
Age before beauty.
Colonel Rochelle, Lisbon Falls. There's a lot of interest, I think, in all these bonds, and whether it's school or town. And I'm a firm believer that there's not a difference between school and town. With the town, it's all the same people, same pocket. But I do believe, whether it's the town garage, the school, the track, that I think we really need to keep an open mind to these bonds and actually allow the people to actually see the information. Last night we had a finance meeting, really interesting. We did a lot of discussions on the bonds of, just how would they be funded and what impact it would be on the town. And even through that meeting, we had a lot of discussions on how it would be. And I think both sides, if you want to call them sides, which are not really the town itself, whether it's the school improvements or the town improvements as a municipality, I think there's some really interesting facts on how these bonds would be paid off and how the structure would be, and how it would affect our taxes, and over a period of time how it would actually pay off quite well, and the idea of the interest rate being low. So I think there's a lot of information for the townspeople to hear, and I'd like to just see it, everybody have an open mind, so we move forward and make sure we do give everybody all the information, and allow the town as a whole to actually make decisions whether or not what's best for the town. Because again, a lot of information when it comes to bonds, it's a big subject, and it's not going to just affect our town today, but for 10 or 20 years. So I would just encourage the council to actually keep an open mind and allow the community to hear all the different factors on these bonds, and hopefully have an opportunity to make the decisions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Roger Cody, Lisbon Falls. Got a nice crowd tonight, I'm kind of impressed. In the budget season, as we move forward and we have all kinds of decisions to make, let's not forget our people on fixed income. We all want a new high school, we all want a new track, we'd love to have a new truck and a new garage, and our roads certainly need help. But let's not forget our elderly and our people on fixed income. I think a little more time could be spent on the redistribution of some of the funds that are already being spent, to be spent a little bit more wisely in certain departments. So not to throw the burden all on the elderly and the people of this town that really can't afford to raise their taxes. I'm at a time in my life where it really doesn't make a lot of difference to me. Middle income, no kids, you know, life is good, but there are a lot of people out there that are not in that situation. And I just hope that we don't forget these people, because they're a very, very important part of this community that have been paying taxes for a long, long time. And I just want that to just bring that out to people, that we don't forget that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cody. Let's wait, see if they're...
Tracy Austin, taxpayer, resident, and part of the school committee. There's never a good time. There is never, ever a good time. Even in the most fiscal, bountiful years, has there ever been a good time to ask for projects like this? This came forth not from, we had a study done in 2010 justifying whether or not we could try to get on the school buildings list through the state. As we all know, the state doesn't have money. They used to be able to fund 20-something projects a year. We got close. We were at 27 one year. They don't have that anymore. The cost of building just keeps rising. They barely can get through 3. So we are never, at least in my lifetime, maybe my kid's lifetime, maybe, going to get help from the state. So unfortunately, we will have to do it on our own. There is never a good time. I've been hearing about this new gym since I was in school. I think when some of you were in school. It is never a good time. The reason we brought this forth is because community members were pulling me aside, pulling my other members aside, asking, what's the plan? Is there a plan? Has there ever been a plan? Unfortunately, because of budgets, we have neglected many, many items as a system. Before me, during me, not as of late, because of changes in leadership, we have decided enough is enough. And we have been making changes, some visual, some not. Some of them in the working mechanics of the building itself. But the structure is sound, it's the heart of our community, and things need to change. This is the only way we are going to ever be able to accomplish that. We are on probation. We do have a NEASC visit in October of 2015, which we will be reassessed again. I am hoping that the improvements that we have made will help us, but there are still items on that checklist that at this point we need the money. We need to fix the items that we have for the bond. I ask this not because my child participates in any. He may use it for phys ed or an activity like that, but the gymnasium, you think of basketball, wrestling, cheering. My children do not participate in that. I do it because it's the right thing. It was the right thing to vote the other night to move this forward to the town council, to ask you to pass it forward, to let the public decide. That's what I was asked to do in starting this process, and that's what I'm asking you to do.
Thank you, Tracy. Is there anyone else? Certainly.
Good evening, Richard.
I touched it. I broke it. I'm sorry.
This evening, before you look at the item on your agenda in regard to the school's bonds, I just wanted to share some information because, like many in the room this evening, there's a lot of hearsay and rumors that are on the outside. And I had some conversations with some council members, and I just wanted to clarify a few things. One is I can actually answer your question about the cost. I believe when you do look at the cost of taxes and how much it locally has been raised for the schools, you will find, at least over the last couple of years, that there has been a very big commitment, I believe, from the community in the range of anywhere from 250 plus thousand each year of new money that has to be raised locally. So the community has put forth. I don't have the numbers exactly from last year, but I know that your circumstances on the town side changed around June or July, I believe, because of the revenue sharing. So I do know that the town has committed to the budget over the last several years. This year, however, we are in a good situation. For those that may or may not know, over the last 5 years, we've looked very closely at what we call our essential programs and services, and as a result, this year, we were just recently informed through the preliminary ED 279, which is the document that the State Department of Education gives to the school department that outlines our funding. We are going to receive, potentially, it is preliminary, but there is a significant increase in our subsidy, which would then lower the local taxes currently by over $230,000. So that, again, we do have some resignations and things that have fallen into place over the last couple of weeks. But there is going to be, I can assure you this evening, I know it was said last year, but I can assure the taxpayers in Lisbon Falls, that barring any catastrophic, I guess, legislative action, your taxes in regard to the school side will be decreased next year. When you talk about it's never a good time, just going on some of the conversations in our informational meeting and the data that we've looked at, to me, what I'm hoping for this evening is at least you begin the process and allow the school department, myself in particular, the opportunity to present to you how we could pay for this, because I do have some options that I've looked at as a result of actually a comment that you made during the last informational meeting is what do you do with the expiring bonds? And so what I had done through our plan is I had put through that in 6 years when those bonds expired, you would have a relief of a certain amount of money. However, what I learned is that each year there's an interest that comes off of those bonds every single year. So we currently have 2 bonds on the school department side. And each year from now until the time that those bonds expire, the decrease in interest changes from anywhere from $18,000 to $34,000 per year. So when you start, it doesn't seem like a lot, but when you start adding $25,000, $30,000 each year, then the local contribution decreases significantly. So one of the things about a gymnasium or track is there's the bond interest. There's a proposal that I would have and how we would pay for this. If we kept that particular line flat, you could use that money to offset, and it wouldn't be additional new money each year. We've had multiple informational nights. We do have one scheduled for April 9th from 5:30 to 7 at the high school, where we'll be sharing updated information in regard to the gymnasium. We're hoping to try to do some preliminary schematic designs, which is people have asked, well, why is the project $5.7 million? You know, when a gym doesn't cost, we built one locally for such and such an amount. Well, it's actually the underneath. It's the locker rooms. It's the other areas that we haven't. We've shown you some designs of what the outside would look like, but it's really the stuff that's on the inside that would look like. And plus, we had community members say, well, what about having bleachers on both sides of the gym? Is the court a certain size? Because, as many of you may know, the MPA changed the regulations on playoffs. Those are all things that would be answered as part of those discussions. So I would ask that you give us the opportunity to do that. One of the things that's just occurred since last Thursday, we met with RSU 5. Many of you may have seen in the papers that RSU 5 is doing a withdrawal, and we met with the withdrawal working group from that particular from RSU 5, and what they were asking us is, and they're going out, they're sending out this information to all the area schools, and what they're saying, or what they have, is where they're withdrawn, the Pownell and Durham students are looking for a high school. There are over 200 students currently in RSU 5 from Durham and Pownell. About 160 are from Durham. They're hoping to make a decision by the end of June on where, if they're going to allow students to all go to one system or not. We obviously couldn't handle 200 students. But one of the things one of the things that came up in those conversations was the fact that we were on probation through our accreditation. It also came up, they asked us about AP courses and stuff, so we did give them that information, and they are hoping to make a decision in June, by June 30th, and then it would be implemented starting in July 1st of 2015. So I know we talk about accreditation, but I can tell you that when we shared with them all of our comprehensive educational plan, all of our flyers outlining our schools and stuff, I received a response from the superintendent that was very impressed. But in this case, we are, I believe, we're at a disadvantage because we are on probation. Our location is good, and the fact that our tuition per pupil costs are much lower than some of the other systems. So I think they'll use that against those systems. They're going to ask them to match what it costs for students to go to our system. They want to negotiate is what they were trying to do, the student costs. But at $8,600, $8,700 per student, if you do the math, 50 students or so, if you can get a certain amount of those students to go to your schools, it would help offset this. Now, I can't guarantee that even one would attend, but I can tell you that we'd be in a much better spot if we were able to tell them that we are moving forward with this as we did on Thursday, and we're having those conversations about really making improvements to our infrastructure, which, as a town, you will say as well that we've neglected over the last several years, and we do need to address. One of the things that came up was the fact that we looked at the June referendum is when we're planning on having our referendum. The term of what I've heard from different people is that people are afraid that this is going to be what they refer to as a skewed population of people voting, and they're saying that if it's because it's a school budget referendum, that only parents and people who are for the school would be part of that referendum, and therefore we should wait till November for this. Now, I did a little research because I've been in this district for 12 years, and I did some research, and we've never had, the only reason why we have a June referendum is because that's something that's required by the state, that we have to go out and do a budget validation referendum for our school budget each year. The reason why we put our bond on there so that we could save about $4,000 or whatever it is to have a referendum. But that's never been the case, with the exception, I believe, of the mill referendum, which I think was put in the November election date. Referendums have occurred, those dates have occurred at any time of the year. For the school over the last several years, we've had one in January, which was for LCS, which was approved. We've had one in 2009 in April, which was $500,000 to do a new versus reno analysis at the high school, which failed. And then we had the latest one, which was in 2010, which was the front entrance in the buildings, and that passed. One thing I can assure you, and if I've learned anything in the 12 years I've been here, is that if there's a bond issue that is going to impact taxes and that people don't have the information, or if they have the information, they will show up and vote. So I will say that I do disagree with the fact, and there's no data to support, in my opinion, that changing the referendum from June to November is going to have any impact on the number of people who are going to come out and vote. Because I know, based on my experience, that in this community, people who are concerned and people who are informed, those are the two things. If you don't inform the people, then you can put any bond out there, it's never going to be passed. But if you can inform the people and put that out there, then then people will at least come out and vote one way or the other. And that's all we're asking for, is to get an idea of where the community stands and to have the opportunity to look at these changes. The other piece is that when you look at it, it's like anything, the longer you wait, the more it's going to cost. Interest rates now for the school system is very good, very competitive. I know that, for instance, since 2010, when we originally did this proposal, that the cost of the project has gone up almost $750,000. So every year we wait, it's going to get a little bit more expensive. This is the opportunity, or potentially the opportunity, to take advantage of some low interest rates and utilize some existing money to offset the costs. To conclude, I just want to let you know that over the last 5 years as superintendent, I've been asked to look at consolidation of resources with the town and the school department, and I can honestly tell you, in probably the 2 to 3 hours that I've met with Mr. Olmstead and even today with Mrs. Malloy, we have probably made more progress in having those types of difficult conversations, and hopefully over the next several weeks we'll be able to have those conversations, including even the maintenance garage and how that would impact, and how the school, if in fact we work together to look at what we could do to save on resources, whether it's our maintenance or whatever, those types of conversations. We've never had those conversations before. And so I think that just in the few hours that we've spent, we probably very shortly we'll be able to share with you some ideas that are going to save the taxpayers a lot of money over the long term. So.
Thank you, Mr. Green. I just want to, I just wanted to point out that in discussion with Mr. Green, asked him to make sure he was here this evening so that everyone could hear before we started our orders later on in the agenda, a synopsis of everything that's been going on. So I thank you for doing that, Mr. Green.
There's a couple of chairs behind me if somebody would like to come in, sit down. There's another one over there.
Okay. There are extra chairs if people in the hall want to come and sit down. Thank you. I think we'll move on to the next agenda item, just so we can keep moving.
Audience participation response.
At this point, normally I know I respond for council and then counselors who have individual comments join in, but I think that we have a lot of responses open. So Councilor Pesky and I will respond to most of them, but I'm still going to welcome additional responses from council. So what I would like to do is respond to the audience comments and questions in the order that we heard them so we can get through them. Mr. Fillmore asked us to look at our working rules, and then later on, Mrs. Yergin asked us to do that too. And as you know, we'll be discussing our working rules a little bit later on, so we'll keep that in mind during that discussion. And so hopefully some responses will come up during that. I think, Dot, your question, your main question that you had was answered by Mr. Green in terms of where the money, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong note, sorry. There we go, that was Mrs. Welsh, and I went out of order, which is not what I wanted to do. But I hope that question was answered for you, Mrs. Welsh. Okay, maybe you can talk with...
Not completely. I
Okay.
heard the school side, but I'm not sure I heard the town.
Okay, well, maybe you can talk with Mr. Green. He has way more information than he was able to give us tonight. Or Mr.
School side, I just didn't hear the
Okay.
Just want to know percentage, I think.
part of it.
Came in on the budget last year.
Yeah, in terms of the town budget, we came in under budget on, do you want to respond, Roger?
No, we came in probably, and I'm gonna say, probably $10 on the budget from the previous year.
2013
Right.
went down, in 2012, same.
Yeah, basically. It's, but I know last year, our budget was just a handful of dollars, lower than the year before.
Yeah, I think people need to understand we're suffering from the same problem that the school is, in that we're losing money from the state. So, it's like when your pocketbook goes down, you have to refill it from somewhere else. It's not that we're spending any more money, but we're just not bringing as much in, and that's the unfortunate problem. That equation has to balance out there. Yeah, and the taxes have gone up, but the spending stayed level, but the revenues from the state went down because, when you pay your 5% income or sales tax on anything you buy in the store, some of that money is supposed to come to the towns to help keep your income, your local property taxes down, but the state hasn't been paying out how much they're supposed to by law. They've been skirting that law, and that hurts all of us right here at the local level. So, if you want to see where the problem is, it's at the State House, really. Yeah.
Ms. Welch, one of the really important things that I hope people will take in consideration is every year we have uncontrollable costs, which is all basically related to personnel. So in the town, every year we start a budget of at least $150,000 in the hole. So every year, if we don't cut the budget somewhere, you would have a $150,000 increase to the budget for your taxes. The school has the same thing. They have nearly $250,000. So if you take the $250,000, the $150,000, we're almost a mill with just increases every single year. So both the school committee and the town council, as long as I've been following town government, which has been several years, has worked very hard, in my opinion, to make sure that we are doing what we can do. Honestly, in response to the roads, we'd love to put $600,000 in the budget this year for the roads, but it's probably not going to happen. We have to do what is feasible. In response to tax allocation for the school, 2010, 55% went to the school, 39% went to the town. 2011, 57% went to the school, 37% went to the town.
And are you talking about
The percentage of your taxes.
The overall,
but I'm talking about just the increase from year to year, where was that level?
I don't have that number. You're more than welcome to contact Mr. Olmsted or the finance director to get that. 2012, 56% went to the school, 38% went to the town. 2013, 55% went to the school, 39% went to the town. I'm not going to give you 2014 because we haven't got there yet.
And that's fine, I guess I was looking at the increases, where those, so I will research that.
Is there any reason
Thank
why
you.
your two numbers don't equal 100%?
Yes, the rest of it went to the county.
We pay the county $500,000 a year.
For what?
Yeah, good,
It's a very good question.
good question.
What? Many things. One more thing I just want to say, and then I'll let Madam Chairman finish, is I received, let me just first say thank you to everyone for coming out to talk tonight and voice your opinion. If we had a fifth of you attend our budget meetings, maybe we'd get a little more citizen input, but we go with 5 or 6 people every single meeting. A lot of people have contacted me saying, you guys are voting on to allow the public bonds to go through tonight. Please let it go. But one thing I want to make sure everyone knows tonight is we are not voting to put it on the ballot tonight. We are voting to move to a public hearing. So there's still going to be, if council approves all 3 of the budget or the bonds, or whatever ones that do go through, we still have another public hearing, and then council will make a final decision on if we're going to move to the June election or not. So please understand that tonight is not the decision if a bond is going to pass the council or it will fail. Thank you.
This is the opportunity for the information gathering that Mr. Green was talking about. I'm going to, thank you, Dylan. I'm going to move on to Dot. I did find my note about your comments. I think that Mr. Layton has looked into your question about the trails money, and I don't have that answer for you right now, but I'll ask Mr. Olmsted and Mr. Layton to see if we can put together the information so we can at least answer the question, be it good, bad, or indifferent for you, okay? I think a lot of people agree that more money needs to be going into roads. Mr. Willie, I think council appreciates your apology, and we understand we all have bad days. And we always appreciate your input and your participation. Your comments about the infrastructure are valuable, and as was your input. Mr. Warren commented on how committees work. Thank you for your insight, Mr. Warren. Mrs. Crossgill, the school committee comments. Again, we know how near and dear it is to your heart, and thank you for your comments. I think it's enlightening for a lot of people to hear the different points of view that are strongly in favor of our schools, which we all should be. Mr. LaRochelle made a point that I've heard him say before, and I always appreciate it. The school and the town work out of the same pockets, and we always have to keep that in mind. We do have a lot of information for people, and agreeing again with Mr. Green that it's important for everyone who's here and everyone in town to go to the hearings and get that information. Mr. Cody, your reminder to us to keep folks with fixed incomes in mind. It's a balance of compassion and need to improve our town, and that is a fine balance. And it is something we always have to keep in mind. We appreciate that. Mrs. Austin, your insights about never being a good time, that pretty much goes for everybody, and we really, your comments are very well received, I think, by council, but I don't think I could add to them because it was heartfelt and well thought out, and I think that we appreciate Mrs. Austin's service on the school committee a great deal. Mr. Green, I won't go over everything that you talked about because you covered a lot of information for us in a very short period of time, and again, thank you very much for being here and being available for information. I know that you're very open for questions and information from anyone at any time, so that's something that's very valuable to council as well. I think I got through everybody. Okay, so once again, I think that we need to make sure that we urge our friends, our neighbors, and our relatives to go to the hearings that we have, because that information gathering is important to make the decisions that we need to make for our town. And nobody likes to go to the ballot and see a question that they didn't know anything about. I know that every person who I've talked to recently wants to be informed, and so I think that all of council encourage everyone to do that. We'll move on, unless any other councilors have anything else to add. Okay. We'll move on to the next item, please, Twyla.
Which is the consent agenda. Any counselor wishing to have any item removed may do so now. Items removed will be considered next. Vote to approve the minutes of March 17, March 18, and March 25.
Make the motion to accept.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Order passed, 7-0.
The next item, please.
Under council orders, ordinances, and resolutions, Order 2014-46 to adopt the street name for map U08, lots 35 and 35A for E911.
Can you remind, I know we talked about this earlier, Twyla, can you remind me what we'll be doing? I know we have information in here on that lot.
Kathy Malloy pointed out that in the original 1957 Houston Park subdivision, the plan called for Center Street to intersect with the 2nd Street and continue parallel with East Avenue. And because Center Street did not continue past 2nd Street's lots 35 and 30A were referred to as off of Center Street. This is inconsistent with our own street naming ordinance, E911, and has caused a great deal of confusion when trying to locate these two properties. Lot 35 has recently sold, and the new owners, Charlie and Ashley Woodbury, have requested that the extended driveway be assigned the name Tranquil Lane. The owner of Lot 35A has been notified and has no objections to that new name. So with your permission, we need a vote to rename or to name that street Tranquil Lane.
Okay.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Do we need any council discussion before we vote? Okay. All those in favor?
Order passed, 7-0.
Tranquil Lane. Next item, please.
Order 2014-47 to set the polling hours, locations, register hours, and casting of absentee ballots for the June 10th, 2014 election. Polling hours recommended are 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. The locations, Ward and District 1, is at the Superintendent's Central Office Building Gymnasium. Ward or District 2 is at the MTM Community Center Gymnasium. The register hours would be held at the town office on June 3, 4, 5, 6, and 9 during regular office hours here, and on Election Day, June 10th, during the polling hours from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. We'd like to cast absentees on Election Day, 7, 8, 10, 2, 4, 6, 7, and 8, in accordance with Title 21A.
Okay. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make the motion to accept Order 2014-47.
I'll second it.
Okay. I don't think we need any discussion. All those in favor?
Order passed, 7-0.
And the next item.
Order 2014-48 to approve an amount for the purchase of a replacement plow truck.
Okay. Do we have Mr. Layton?
He's on his way.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Layton will give us a little information.
Good evening. As you are aware, if you read your memo, last Thursday we finalized negotiations with the insurance company for the replacement cost or
what the insurance company was gonna contribute for us to replace the plow truck that was lost in the fire over the President's Day weekend. The insurance company offered up initially around $27,000 for the existing truck. We negotiated up after looking at various comparable vehicles on the market, which there are not very many. And the insurance company agreed on a dollar figure of $48,000, as well as we get to keep ownership of the truck that we lost, because the dump body on that truck is pretty valuable. It's only 2 years old, and it originally cost us about $30,000 to install it, so being able to keep that was kind of critical. Throughout this whole process, we've been looking for used equipment to get prices, and there's just very, very little out there that meets the specifications that we have for a plow truck, because it's heavier duty suspension in the front, heavier duty in the rear, and just the riggers that it faces. What's out there is a lot more light duty than what we're looking for. We did receive some budget estimates from various dealers, and we're looking at around $80,000 to $90,000 for a new cabin chassis, and that's just the bare cabin chassis. We did get prices from HP Fairfield, who sold us the original body, for them to take that body, install it on a new cabin chassis with all the necessary hydraulics, wing, front push setup for the main plow and whatnot, is about $45,000. So based on what we have for cash, or a check coming in the mail at some point, we basically have enough to put what we already have onto a cabin chassis, but we do not have funds at this point for a cabin chassis. So the question that we had, or the recommendation that we had, was to see if the council would approve budgeting $80,000 in the next fiscal year's budget, because where we're at now, by the time we go out to bid, get bids back and whatnot, we wouldn't have to be spending any money till next year. So rather than try to find it in this year's budget, which would take a special appropriation from the surplus, I assume. The recommendation from the finance director, and speaking to Dale, is to budget that money next year. And in the meantime, we'll go out to bid for a cabin chassis that meets our requirements, and continue to look at used equipment. We found a wheeler, we're all familiar, the contractor that was plowing for Durham will now be plowing for Durham after this season, and his equipment's going to be up for sale. We did go look at it today. He's offering it up at $50,000. All those trucks were 2000s, 2 2000s, 2001, and a 99, I believe. They all have 170,000 miles on them. They're all steel bodies, and they're all retired. I mean, they're complete units, but you're still looking at $50,000 just to buy the complete unit that we could be replacing that in a couple of years. So for longevity's sake and for the best return on investment for the town, I quite strongly feel the best alternative is for us to go look at replacing with a new cabin chassis, and reusing the body on the truck that we have. So that's my quest, yes.
Do you have any additional insights, Mr. Olmsted?
No, I think Ryan's covered it pretty well.
Okay.
I think the difference in tonight's discussion and the last time we talked is that because of the timing of bidding out and having the truck manufactured, if you will, it's about a 6-month lead time. So if we build that into the next budget were adopted at the end of May, and we began the process of speccing and bidding the truck, you won't probably get that truck delivered until October, November.
Unless someone already has one on the lot, but even still, I mean, you're talking
That's,
May and June.
yeah, that rarely happens when they usually don't bring these in on lots to sell.
Based on, like I said, based on the specifications that we provided, which was what was done for the ones that we had, they just, some of the people laughed when we said something about getting a used one that was close, because it's just not the way they come in. They have a certain style truck that they know they're going to sell. They're not going to bring in much of these oddball type of things. So.
Any questions from council for Mr. Layton?
So overall, we're looking anywhere between $125,000 to $135,000 complete, ready to drive. Is that correct?
Correct.
So one of the things I'm thinking about in the back of my mind is I remember reading somewhere in the charter, council can only spend up to $100,000 without going to the citizens for approval. And my question, I guess, is we have the $45,000 from the insurance, and we want to budget 80 to 90 for a new cabin chassis. Would we need to go to the citizens because the overall budget is over 100,000, or would we not because we're expending or we're raising through taxation 80 to 90,000?
I don't think so.
I don't believe you do. It's not.
I don't think so.
Yeah, that's a better ask of your attorney.
The way the charter is written, I think it's section 811, the only time you need to go to the voters is if you're issuing more than $100,000 in financing. Okay? You can spend the additional money, but anytime you go over the $100,000 with your note or your lease purchase agreement or whatever form it takes, that's when you have to go. The total is over that, but some of it is being funded from another source. But you're not borrowing up to 100, and you are not required to go to vote.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You answered my question.
Good question, Ryan.
All right, any other?
So just to summarize, staff's recommendation is to fold this into the budget process that we're now involved in.
So are we still going to be looking for a used one, time being?
In the meantime, we can continue to follow that process. I mean, based on the amount of, the insurance company spent weeks doing their own research, market research. We've spent weeks and months doing our own as well. It's just, some of the ones they found were in Canada. There's just not that kind of market. And the way this winter went, from what we understood, anything that was good was bought up because it was just.
Right.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
The motion is to approve an amount for the purchase of a replacement plow truck, and it'll be added to the budget process. All those in favor?
Order passed, 7-0.
Thank you, Ryan. And the next item, please, Twyla.
Order 2014-49, consideration of an order for public hearing on proposed issuance of $1.1 million for general obligation securities for the construction of a new public works garage. The action requested is to approve the order for the public hearing for April 15th at LCS at 7 p.m. for the public works garage.
Well, can we put all of them together and just vote once?
We just take
If you
one,
like.
one motion on approving all three to go to the
public hearing?
To the public
Public
hearing,
hearing.
right. It would still be separate for voting purposes there.
Exactly.
But, we
But I
could
think
just
you
handle
could
this
as a
one
block,
motion.
send them all to public hearing.
Why don't we do that?
Want to?
Yeah. You all right with you?
I'm fine with that.
I'd make a motion to consolidate orders 2014-49, 2014-50, 2014-51 to approve to move to a public hearing.
For all three.
I'll second
All
that.
three.
All those in favor?
Order passed, 7-0.
Thank you. All right. And our next item, please.
The next item, if I have correctly guessed this, is the other business, Finance Committee report to council.
And if there's a question from the audience, I just want to see if there was something. I want to make sure people go away understanding what happened here in case there's any questions.
Sure.
Could the chair recognize Mr. Willie's question?
Oh, she just had a little sidebar with me. Do we know where the public hearing will be yet? Will it be at the high school or LCS?
At LCS. At
LCS.
April 15th.
All three of them?
April 15th, 7 o'clock.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
That's all right.
No, that's okay. That's a good question.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure that
Yeah.
nobody went away thinking we weren't going to pay attention to the audience.
All right. Do we have Jessica? Is that? I'm sorry. It wasn't.
Finance Committee report to council.
Oh, and who's presenting for the Finance Committee?
Jessica.
Okay.
There she is.
These guys filled around.
I know we're moving on to some,
They don't want me
a
going.
different track of business.
Yeah.
If there are folks who needed to leave, or other folks who wanted to come in and take seats, we could do that now. Okay.
La Rochelle, Finance Committee, I guess, tonight report.
We're having
The,
trouble with that mic, so.
Yeah, so you want me to speak up?
Yes, please.
The Finance Committee met last night, and we actually reviewed our, what we've actually been able to follow along with the budget process as it is. We actually didn't come to any conclusions yet, as nor anybody else at this point, about the budget process. What we did agree upon is to actually keep following the process and to participate in the public hearing, to actually listen to the community, and then after that kind of gather up to kind of give our recommendations. Unfortunately, initially we thought that well, it was recommended that we give our recommendation earlier in the process, but due to the different process this year with the budget and just how fluid everything is with the new ideas, we felt it would be better to wait after the public hearing to do so. So at this point, we're just kind of following along, taking notes, and trying to get informed of all the information, and trying to keep up on the information with the bonds also, just to make sure that we are aware of what the bond issues are and the factors and how they're going to, how to say, affect our financial commitment going forward. So besides that, unless there's some other questions, I mean, we're pretty much doing what council is at this point, and sit back listening and trying to get as much information as we can with the budget process.
Great. Thank you, Fern. Is everybody all set? Okay. And our next item
Is the council's roles and responsibilities.
all right, that's Mr. Terrio, our town attorney, has agreed to give us a little presentation. We've been a few months, had a lot going on, and I think it's good to keep us all on track and make sure we know how we're moving forward.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of council. We did do this several months ago. However, at that point in time, we covered a lot of territory, a lot of different subject matters. Tonight, I think it would be better if I didn't attempt to repeat all of it, nor do I intend to. But to focus on essentially what council's all about, what they do and how they do it. I know that many of you, I've heard it said, when you sit in your duties as a counselor, sort of ask yourself, what's my job description? And look around, and nobody has a job description for a counselor. But actually you do, and it's called the charter. And I think what I'd like to do tonight is to go through the provisions of the charter that sort of define not only your duties and powers, but your relationship with your administrative staff. And to focus on those issues, those two issues, and hopefully I can do that reasonably quickly. Again, if there are any questions, please say so. Happy to answer questions. This is intended for all of our benefit, and if there's some questions out there that I haven't explained things properly, then I need to know, we need to make sure we're all on the same page. We need to start with a recognition of the difference between administrative and legislative powers. And we talked about that a bit last December. Basically what we're talking about is the difference between what happens and how it happens. What happens are the legislative piece of this, and that's your responsibility. Decide what's going to happen. How it happens, how it gets carried out, is the administrative piece of this, and that is the responsibility of your manager and your staff. It's, I think, of some benefit to talk briefly about the distinctions between selectmen, the selectmen form of government, and a council manager form of government, because it illustrates, I think, the difference between what's administrative and how that happens, and what's legislative and how that is put into place. The selectmen in the town are administrators. They have virtually no legislative authority. They cannot enact ordinances except for a very few that are dictated by state statute. And that's the extent of where they go with the legislative piece of this. The council, however, operates in the same manner and with the same authority as a town meeting does in a selectman town meeting form of government. Those are the powers that you as a council exercise. So everything the town meeting does, you're now responsible for. The selectmen are administrative officers, as I have said. Often they will have a manager. There's a state statute that defines the role of the manager and the role of the selectmen as to who's responsible for what. Absent that, the selectmen are responsible for administering the town. The council, however, is the legislative body, as I have indicated. They're the town meeting. They are the only ones who can exercise legislative powers. As I said, the job description is where you start talking about these legislative policies and powers. And that's what your charter is all about. Your charter is the document that some very smart folks in this town spend a good deal of time thrashing over and coming up with a format, a blueprint, if you will, as to how this town is going to exercise its municipal powers. How we're going to deliver the services to our people and who's going to be responsible for what. We've talked about charters before. Unless there are any questions, I'm not going to get into what they are, how they get to be charters, and all that sort of thing. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. Essentially, it goes back to home rule and all of those sorts of things we talked about before. The charter does provide for the conduct of municipal affairs, and the town under home rule and in your charter has all the powers necessary and convenient for the conduct of your affairs. So the charter really is not a document of limitation. It is a document that expresses the full range of powers that you have in order to conduct your municipal affairs. There is a provision in your charter that talks about the separation of administration and legislation. Again, remembering that the town exercises both legislative authority and administrative authority, but they're done by different sets of individuals. The legislative function, essentially in your charter, talks about ordinances, regulations, resolutions, and orders. And if you think about these for a minute, these are the types of actions that dictate how things are done or how things should be done or how things need to be done. They don't get them done. They simply provide the framework for allowing that to happen through your administrative staff. You establish policies to determine the course of conduct for the town, and that's mentioned in your charter, and you formulate rules of conduct consistent with all of these. Again, if you look at those, you're not doing anything other than setting the framework for how things will be done. The administrative powers, however, are vested with your town manager and your staff. Why is that? It's because these need to be enacted and carried out. Administration is exactly that. You're administrating, you're seeing that the rules, regulations, ordinances, powers, the framework that you talked about as to how you accomplish municipal purposes has to be put in place. It has to be administered, it has to be done. Council, according to your charter, is not involved and should not be involved in the exercise of the administrative powers. That's up to your manager and that's up to your staff. So direction to employees and that sort of thing is beyond the scope of your authority and is something that you should not be contemplating. The exception to that is that the council has the right to determine that their legislative enactments and policies are, in fact, being carried out appropriately. So you still have the responsibility to make sure this is happening. You do that through your meeting. There was some issue about personnel and how that falls into place in terms of your charter and in terms of the dichotomy between administration and legislative. The charter states very clearly that council shall not dictate appointments or removal of any town administrative personnel. It doesn't get much clearer than that. And that's in your charter. The only exception for that in your charter is that council acts has the authority to, I'm losing the word, affirm the appointment of 8 positions in the town, which are essentially department heads. So you do get involved in the process, but you have to confirm, which is the word I was groping for, those 8 positions. You also are allowed to express your views regarding the appointment or removal of personnel to the manager. So you're not necessarily required to be silent about that situation. You may have your opinions and you may share those with the manager, but that is obviously several steps short of attempting to dictate or somehow affect that personnel relationship. Also in the charter, in explicit terms, is the fact that you deal with your town employees and officers that are subject to the supervision and control and direction of the manager solely through the manager. I'm not making this up, guys, okay? Honest. This is what's in your charter, and I spent some time going through this, pulling this stuff out, because essentially, remember, we talked about job description. This is describing how the job of governing the town gets done. And it specifically says you shall not give orders to such employees publicly or privately. So some of this is very, very explicit in terms of what the roles are, what your powers and duties are. That's not to say you shouldn't be concerned, that you shouldn't have discussions with your manager regarding issues, but ultimately you have to deal through him, and it's his responsibility to take care of the personnel issues. In fact, your manager under the charter is designated as the personnel director. And one of his duties under the charter is to administer the town personnel system. And he has the duty to, and this happened several years ago, but to draft and update personnel rules and procedures, which were presented to you several years ago, as I said, and have been updated several times since then. But that's part of his responsibility. So that's the mechanism that you use to direct how the administration of personnel happens. But administration of those rules is the manager's. The manager has certain powers and duties that relate to employees, in addition to what I've already cited in the charter, that are listed there. It says specifically he'll direct and supervise the administration of all departments. He'll appoint, prescribe duties, supervise, suspend, remove, or discipline employees. That's his job. It's his job. He has other duties in there, but they're not personnel related, such as executing the dictates and ordinances and rules and regulations of the council, the budget issues. He's the purchasing agent. He reports to council, advises council, makes recommendations to council as well. That's part of his administrative duties to the town. Generally, other council responsibilities in your charter that are part of your job description is to appoint, obviously, the 8 department heads, but also a number of boards and commissions that you have in your charter: planning board, zoning board, the budget committee, the conservation committee, the library board, I think there's some provisions in there for appointing vacancies on other boards that may occur that would otherwise be elected. There are financial provisions that you're responsible for. You're all keenly aware of the fact that it's budget season, and that's going to be your next probably focus in the next few months in terms of trying to find a way to fund the activities and services that the town is required to provide to its citizens. It's not an easy task. As part of that, you're also required to address and approve a capital program in terms of your capital assets and how that's going to be handled down the road. And you're also required, as you did tonight, to begin the process regarding the issue of permanent financing. Fund those kinds of things that you can't fund on a year-to-year basis that are so large that you need to borrow money for. So that's something that council obviously is intimately aware of. And you're also involved in some of the elections process, such as you move warrants for elections, you deal with petitions as they come through, recall petitions that council has dealt with in the past with regard to public employees. And although we haven't had any, there are provisions for special town meetings on budgetary items. Those are all things that, according to the charter, you folks are responsible for. So that's your job description. That's what you do. I said I'd be brief. There must be some questions. I guess they don't have to be.
Mr. Fillmore has a question. As long as it's short, I'm happy to hear it.
Oh, good. I'll come to the mic. Oh, I have a big mouth. Larry Fillmore from Lizard. Did I hear Mr. Terrio say that when the council hired the interim town manager, the interim town manager assumed all of the responsibilities that's in the charter?
I don't think he said that specifically, but I don't think he may have but he inferred it. I don't think you used the word interim town manager at any point.
Oh, I know that, but I'm saying, does Mr. Olmsted have all of the powers and responsibilities that is in our charter for the town manager? Or did the council restrict his duties or powers, or however you want to say that function?
We hired Mr. Olmsted to do what a town manager does. We didn't restrict him in any way. The only restriction is the charter and council.
That's the
And I
answer to the
think there
question.
would be a problem restricting it if
It
it
wouldn't
conflicted with the
wouldn't be
charter.
in line with the charter.
Yeah, exactly. So
Right.
I don't think you can hire half an interim manager. Nor do I think you could. All set? Okay.
Thank you, Roger.
She'll take my
Thank
leave.
you.
That was enlightening and a little bit easier to listen to without all the dry reading that we, not that it wasn't valuable.
I thought we'd try another approach.
Thank you very much.
If you think about any questions, you all know where to get them. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Roger. I would, and I urge council to call Roger or email him anytime you have a question, or even through Mr. Olmsted if you need to, but I've always found him to be very approachable and eager to answer questions, so. All right, we'll move on to the next item, please, Twyla.
Which is C, review council working rules.
Aha. So about 3 months ago, we revised our working rules, and we agreed at that time that we would revisit the rules, see how it was going, see if we wanted to make any changes, see if we wanted to keep everything the same, see if we wanted to add anything. So,
I'm gonna let it go the way it is.
are you sure?
Yeah, I'm not gonna start an argument.
I'll open up. I have a quick note. I like having the new business at towards the end of our meeting to give citizens the opportunity to address things that weren't on the agenda, where previously it were only agenda items could be addressed during a council meeting. I didn't know if any other counselors had any comments on this. I think new business is a funny name for it, but maybe audience.
No, new businesses should be correct.
But new business would refer to the council doing new business, and this would be audience new business.
Okay.
I'm just thinking about future counselors, you know, maybe somebody else will be sitting in this chair 2 years from now, or your chair. Just for clarification.
Maybe we could just say new business, you know, public comment, something like that, just make a little clarification of what it is.
That's all, that's what I was thinking of.
I think it's good to have it there so that people have, if they have concerns that aren't already on the agenda, they can bring those forward and have a
Yeah,
chance to talk
I
to
like-
us. I would object to any.
I think we've
attempt to
benefited from
remove
it.
that, yes.
Mhm. I know that also during workshops, I think we went back and forth about whether it was allowed or not, and to have public comment at workshops. And I think everybody knows that I was not a proponent of having public comment at workshops. But I think it's important to know why I feel that way. I feel that a workshop, a council workshop, is so that council can work together in a less formal place to talk and get things done, since the only times that we can talk and get things done as a whole council are public meetings. So it's not like we can all get together and have coffee and talk about a proposal or an event or something else that comes down the pike. We can't do that. The only time we can do that is at a council meeting or a council workshop. So my feeling has been that the workshop is for councilors. And if we have committee members or staff or interested parties who we would like to ask questions of or accept input from, we have that in the rules already. The chair can recognize anyone to ask a question or make a comment anytime the chair wants to. And any counselor can suggest to the chair that they would like that. And, I mean, I don't think that I think that if a counselor wants to hear a question, that it's a perfectly good reason to hear it. So I think that my view is that an open public comment at the end of a workshop doesn't add to the workshop itself or the reason for having the workshop, where having public comment at more than one time, during a council meeting, I am a big proponent of. So that's why I have not been a proponent of it. Now, that's not to say that I don't listen to questions or comments from folks after meetings. Sometimes I cut it short because I'm tired, but I think that that's just where I stand on that. It's not because I don't want to hear what people have to say, and I guess I just want to make that clear. It's just that I don't think that that's the purpose of a workshop. On the other hand, we haven't had that many people make comments at workshops, so it hasn't been detrimental to the workshops to have it. So I'd rather not have it, but if the rest of council would prefer to see it, it's not going to break my heart to see it stay in there.
I think it's worthwhile to keep it. I mean, you could just, informally at least limit it to say, 5 minutes of total discussion time. You don't want to have, I understand you don't want to have 30 people show up and each claim, I got my 2 minutes and, we're going to be another hour after the workshop. But, if one person has a question or some information, I don't see why we'd say, no, go away, we don't want to hear from you.
Right.
I think it's important to hear from the public.
I agree, but the wording currently is that the chair may allow. It doesn't mandate it, so if there's reason not to, then so be it. But I would prefer to see it in there because we're only 7 people. If there's somebody that has something we didn't think of, it gives them the opportunity to ask.
Audience participation to me is very, very important. People call me, people email me. I really value everyone's opinion because they've taken the time to contact me one way or the other. And for people to come to the meetings, I love seeing people in the audience. And I think sometimes what happens is we'll talk about something as a council and we'll know the inside information on it and we'll say something. but we don't always discuss it to a point where everyone understands. Sometimes people will be listening to our conversation and they won't understand what we're talking about. And I think that having a portion during a workshop for somebody to say at the end, I wasn't really clear on what you were talking about there, or can you clarify this, is really important. I don't think it should be a time for someone to come in and bring up something that happened 3 weeks ago or they would like to see us talk about. I think it's important that it is sticks strictly to the topics that we covered during the workshop. I think the little bit of audience participation that we've got from Dot and Larry and Don Fellows, I think he took off, has all been very, very good. Audience participation has been very helpful, brought stuff to my eyes that I didn't see, or a different train of thought that added to my final opinion and final vote. So I think it's very, very important that we keep H5 part of our council working rules. I don't see why we should take it out, personally.
I'm not disagreeing. I want to make it clear that the reason I disagree with it is not because I don't want to hear public comment and that I don't want participation. My reason is because a workshop is not for the public. The public has the right to see what's going on every time the council meets. That's why it's public. The workshop is for the council, so that the council can learn more, add to its knowledge base, and get nitty-gritty work done. So just to be clear, it's not because I don't want input or I don't value it. It's because I don't think that it's the right time and place. But if the rest of council wants to keep it in there, I'm happy to leave it in there, like I said. But I just want to be clear on the fact that it is not because I don't value input, and it's not because I don't want that input. It's because I don't think that that's the reason that we have a workshop. We have a workshop because we don't have any other way to talk about stuff. So that's just so you're clear on it. It's not that I don't appreciate input. I always do. And I have found that input to be valuable a couple of times. So I'm not going to say I haven't found it to be to our advantage, but I like the idea of keeping it limited, but nobody's taken advantage of it either. So I don't think it was anything that we've had to worry about up to this point.
I think if we had a lot of people come and they wanted to talk about something, and we had a situation where it was 11 o'clock at night and we're still have half an agenda to go through, that's why we have the council rules not to go past 9:30 without council vote. Or if we had a lot of citizens come to a workshop on a normal basis, maybe we should relook it. But I think
good point.
I think
Yeah.
if we
don't.
I think if we only have 2 or 3, maybe 5 people come to our workshops, it doesn't take that long, maybe a maximum of 10 minutes to listen to their concerns.
Okay.
I got one question. Interesting. When did we ever vote this to go past 9:30?
We haven't, but
We've had, back
But-
when I was
It
on
happens.
there years ago, we had to make that vote a few times.
I've been here at
Roger
past
remembers
midnight
that.
before.
Oh, yeah.
Any other points on the working rules? I know. Where's my notes that I had before? I had noticed that both Mr. Fillmore and who else? Who else? That's right, Mrs. Jurgen commented on the idea of moving, allowing people to talk after each individual, well, different ideas about whether people talk about each, that we allow audience participation after each order, or if we allow audience participation after all the council discussion. I don't know how council feels about it. I guess down on the new business line, did we say that people can't comment on things?
No, if I remember correctly, it's written in the rules
Okay.
that, again, at the chair's discretion, allows for public comment after each item. I would like to see the public comment to stay where it is, simply for people who want to just make a comment that they don't want to address, while we're going over it, because there are certain people that, like Mr. Green when he came up and gave us his talk, that would fit for that, but it does allow for it. I think we just need to make ourselves avail ourselves to that.
Yeah, okay, so
People have a question.
maybe that isn't as clear. We as a council are more in tune with the complete working rules. It's a summary that most of the public sees most of the time, and anyone can look at the full working rules anytime they want, but maybe that's not clear on the summary, and we can maybe make that a little clearer on there. So why don't we just put our thinking caps on for that?
Yeah, I think maybe if we have an item on there that is something that would be, pertinent to public discussion, I think maybe you need to take the lead there and making sure that people know that they're able to speak, because I think people have felt, okay, I'm not allowed to speak during this time, so I won't even try.
I think.
Never stop Larry.
No, nothing does. Tracy? Sure.
We moved up moved down our public comment after our superintendent's report, because a lot of answers were given when he reported out on certain items, so that if people wanted to ask questions about topics that he brought up, that they were able to do that after those types of reports. So I don't know, it might be a suggestion to look at after your department heads here, to put the public comments there.
I think that's one of the reasons why we put the new audience participation at the end, because a lot of times people would come in or someone would say something during the audience participation, but they didn't have another chance to address the council. And a lot of misinformation was leaving here because they weren't sure of what we were talking about. So that's one of the reasons why we added the new audience participation, so they could ask a follow-up question.
Well, that's what it is.
Yeah, I
That's
think we
what
need
it
to
is.
reword it.
Yeah.
Seek input on town matters not on the agenda for that meeting.
Should be new business, audience participation.
Right, okay, so let's just back up just a little bit. We've already mentioned that this is a summary, and the full working rules are clearer on that point. So this is a summary, and we fit as much of it on here.
Yeah.
Your intent
Yeah.
for number 10 is the second opportunity for
Right.
audience participation.
Right, yes.
We'll have to change the wording on it then.
So that's the
Yes.
first thing I was
Yes, yeah.
bringing up earlier, that
No,
it's
you are
wording.
correct.
Business, audience participation.
They are correct. That was
Add that.
specifically written as new business, stuff
Right.
not on the agenda, so we'll have to reword that.
Right,
Yeah, I mean, it might make a sense to rename the first one audience participation agenda items, and then audience participation additional topics or additional items, so that people are more clear on what those are for.
That would work.
yep.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Right, I think it's important that the public understand what we're actually doing here, so that, where no one's left out.
I mean, it's obvious that it's not
People are
clear right
confused
now,
by it,
so,
and,
yeah.
that's,
Yeah.
if they're confused, then it has to change. Madam Chairman, have a,
Oh,
Can I just make one comment?
sure.
I know that I've been notified by a lot of parents that they won't come to these meetings because the way it is, they don't think they can talk here. They think the only time they can talk is at the very beginning because they watch it on TV and they see how it's been. So it's very hard for us to even get people to come to these meetings. So I think if you do change the wording down here, it is much better, because the way I looked at it, we weren't allowed to talk except for at the beginning.
right.
That's the concept going
Any-
around town.
Anytime that the chair or counselors make a suggestion to the chair that we hear something from the audience, we do. We do.
One thing that I'd say is that since this new council has come together, it's a lot more pain, a little less friction in the atmosphere, and people can feel they can speak to the council a little bit more. But what we are living through in the past was a very regimented council that, no, you're not gonna speak. And a lot of people said, what's the sense of me going there? They're not gonna let us speak anyway.
Did you just say we're a kinder, gentler council?
We
making
try.
sure.
When I was a counselor, Alicia, I'll be honest with you, it was the most comfortable place I've
I think what we have attempted to do in our working rules is make ourselves more approachable. A lot of people don't even know that most of us try to get here at least a half, if we can, at least a half hour or so before our council meeting even starts, so that we're publicly accessible. Hours and hours. A lot of us do have jobs. I think that we don't want to mistake the invitation for input, which we find so valuable, for a free-for-all, or to mistake a council meeting for a town meeting, which it is not. So we need to make sure that we maintain that order. And I think that was our goal when we first started working on these.
So we're going to just do a couple of rewrites and call it good?
I think we're just going to do that. Let's clarify the new business so that it's clear what we really are looking for from our audience.
What do you want on top of audience participation for
Agenda items.
agenda items?
Audience participation.
Agenda items?
Agenda items would be fine.
And then
Agenda and new items, that sounds what you want, right?
Not new items
Not
at the
new,
top.
just agenda.
Not at the top, okay.
So number 10 would read, audience participation, new items.
or any item.
Any item, yeah.
Including agenda.
Yep.
Okay, any item.
Yeah, that was one of the biggest pieces. Wanted citizens to have that second piece to ask a question before they leave here and wait 2 more weeks, or if we're having a workshop the next week, to come in and ask that question. A lot of misinformation was out there, a lot of rumors, and this way we have that second piece to kind of shut them down.
Yeah,
Okay, I'll make those changes on the format.
thank you.
You'll have to go with the one Jody has, because the one that's actually still listed under the clerk base is the old one.
Right, Jody has.
The one has not been
Okay.
put in yet
Correct.
until because I know it costs money to do it, so I know it hadn't been done yet.
Right,
And that's for anybody in the audience too. If you're looking on the clerk base, those are the old rules, not current. So we need to fix that.
right, we'll get those on there. Once we make the corrections, we'll make sure that the corrected
It's
version
being
appears.
Codified now.
Yep, okay, good.
Rachel, the reason that I wanted to change was because a resident does not have the opportunity or the advantage of hearing why we're doing all of this before you people get to it. I'm required to speak on something I don't have a clue. And I don't think that that's the purpose of us getting up here to put input into the problem. If we're making a change, we're trying to get the people to participate in the local government before you people vote on it.
I would hope that they would know that their local government is available all the time, not just for 3.5 hours every other Tuesday.
I understand, but I'm talking about why we're changing something is not always published before a meeting, so we're required to speak on something before we know fully well what the issue is. And that was the reason that I asked that you reconsider this.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
Mhm. Thank you. I think I'm going to,
So he wants
not that
it.
I don't want to hear what you have to say, Dot, but I'm going to limit it at this point because we have
It's
taken a
already
lot
in
of
there
comment. And unless there's anything else from council that we want to add or change? Okay,
And I want to call attention to the fact that 7D already says, when authorized by the chair, additional public comment shall be no longer than 2 minutes. So it's already in there as an item, and I think
Right.
we need to make sure that, if people have something really important, that they can get that in there.
right.
I know I feel uncomfortable, like, may I speak, please? You know, I feel uncomfortable.
It's important to remember, like, one of the reasons that we like to have Mr. Terrio give council direction on roles and responsibilities as council according to our charter. It's not just to educate us. We can call him anytime we want, and most of us do. It's also to help the public to understand why we run a council meeting the way we do, because it's a council meeting. It is not a town meeting. It is a council meeting. The council speaks for the town. As citizens, every citizen has the right to approach their councilors. We have councilors at large. The chair is always available by email or phone. The vice chair is. All of the councilors are, and I don't think a single councilor sitting here cares whether the person who calls them with an issue is from their district or not. We all are happy to talk to anyone who would like information or has questions or would like direction. We're not just here every other Tuesday for 3.5 hours. We're available pretty much. I haven't heard anyone say anything about finding counselors being unavailable when they try to reach them. I know I have a personal rule. I always answer a phone call as soon as I can because I don't like to wait for a call back. I don't expect other people to wait. I think most of the other counselors feel the same way. If someone calls and leaves me a message, if somebody emails me, I try to at least respond and say, I'm here, or I have your question, or I'll look for an answer for you, whatever I need to do. But I think that it's important to remember that, like Mr. Terrio said, we are the council, and we sit here at this table to perform the duty that was once performed by a town meeting. There is no town meeting. This is a town council meeting. And we take these duties seriously. And I think that it's important for everyone to remember that, that charter that nobody really wants to look at because it's really complicated and long and arduous to work through, was put together by citizens in Lisbon who cared enough to make sure that our government works the best way possible for our town, not for any other town. It's tailored for Lisbon. So, yeah, it's dry reading, but it is very informational, as Mr. Fillmore will attest. So, that being said, we should move on to our next item. Twyla?
It's new business.
You want to get up and
There you
speak, Frank?
I think we covered that.
I got it figured out now, Roger.
Okay.
Ooh, that's a good point.
If you do have a question, you have to talk into the microphone.
He doesn't have a question.
Okay.
Uh-oh, we missed something.
We're in trouble.
Well, I wasn't recognized before. I do appreciate the opportunity to speak, ask a question at a workshop. Thank you. I take the time to go out to the workshops, the workshops, and there are very, very few people that do attend the workshops, and there are a lot of new and different things that come up in the workshops, and I do appreciate the opportunity to speak, make a comment, or ask a question. Thank you.
Thank you, Dot.
Steve Warren. Doc and I are on the same wavelength. I want to also say that the atmosphere has improved so much. I just want to make that statement that things have gotten so much better. I really appreciate your willingness to work with the audience and the public. The input is important, and I attend the meetings here, but I also go to other communities and talk about trails issues, and they are very open and allow discussion as part of, before voting on something, they allow discussion. I think that is important. The workshops are also very important, but it should be recognized that a lot of the work that goes into these issues is done by the committees over a long period with lots of public input, and the workshop is maybe your opportunity to focus on the issue, but it may be something, a recent workshop that I was hoping to speak at, but it was not allowed, was to do with things that related to trails and open space, and I felt that the Conservation Commission really should, that was really what I wanted to convey, is that the Conservation Commission really should be given the notice that this discussion is happening and brought into the discussion, because it is important to get their input when you're discussing something. The quality of the decision-making is improved by the long, intense discussion that goes in, the deliberation that goes in on the committee level. So that's important not to disregard. The cost, and we're very, as citizens, we're very concerned about the cost of these projects. So the issues that people are bringing up in relation to trails and the cost of them, we are very concerned about that. It's not something we take lightly, but we want them to be effective, cost and effective, two sides of the equation. We want good results for the community. So I just wanted to convey that's what we do at the committee level.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Mr. Cody?
I have an issue that I'm going to discuss that I don't know how to do it. But I'm going to go, and I'm getting out of order. We have a business on Route 9 that has a tendency to put vehicles in the road. And I've been to, and I think Mark knows what I'm talking about quite well. I've been to the police several times over the last few years. I've gone to DOT several times. And when I'm traveling Route 9 and I have to stop to let a bus go through before proceeding in my lane, I think they're, in the road too much. It's a nice road now, so we shouldn't have to do it. I wish the council or the manager would get involved and put this to bed before we pile up a bunch of cars there or hurt somebody. Then we're going to be dealing with that, because I have complained about this several times to police and to DOT. I've sent pictures. All the vehicles are supposed to be behind the sign, which is 20 feet from the road or 25 feet from the road, according to DOT. And when the cars are parked with the tires beyond the white line, I think they're pushing. And I'd really get a new truck, but if I have to, I'll pile her up.
Thank you, Mr. Cody.
Thank you.
Let me respond to that.
If you like.
Mr. Olmsted, you probably want to have Dennis go check that out. You'll know where it is on Route 9.
Yeah,
I've seen it myself. But
I see it every day.
I'm not gonna be a complainant because he's a competitor of mine, so.
So my question is, Route 9, I believe, is a state highway?
Yes.
So state has the authority, not the town?
It's within the town limits,
Because
so.
he's breaking ordinances.
All right, so the state can establish no parking zones on Route 9?
Yeah.
Yeah, the state actually has a permit that says how many vehicles are supposed to be on that lot at any one time from DOT.
We have one. We have one too.
We have one too, but I mean, DOT is more restrictive.
There's a history there that
there's a long history
you
there,
can be filled in on.
Just
Okay. It's always good to get the history.
All right. Any other new business, new comments, new participation, until we nail down that wording?
Michelle Houston, resident of Lisbon Falls. I just would like to call to your attention, and I probably should have talked, I think it's Brian Layton, who's the
Town engineer? Mhm.
Public Works Director.
Some
Public
Public
Works?
Works.
Yes.
There's been several calls made about Rabbit Road, and I know a town truck came up the other day to check the situation. Every spring, the culvert freezes, and they usually take a couple calls from us that live up there. They come down and they have a tool that unfreezes it, and we have made several calls. the water is now running over the road. So we value getting in and out of our homes, unless somebody wants to kind of replace the road. That's what we're looking at right now. I physically have gone down and rerouted the water that's going across the road. So if somebody could check into that and see if the tool that they use to, I'm not sure if it's working or what we could do about that.
Mr. Olmsted can talk with Mr. Layton about that and
I would
find out what needs
appreciate
to
it.
be done.
And I know they're probably waiting for the temperature to rise and nature to take its course, but literally it's going over the road at this point.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next item, please.
Is council response to new business?
I think we kind of did it as we went.
Appointments, Order 2014-52, appoint election clerks. These are a 2-year term.
Yes, election clerks are Twyla's right hand.
Yes, it's that time again for the council to appoint election clerks pursuant to MRSA Title 21A, Section 503. This year, there were no nominations from the parties to be considered, but this is the list as we've adjusted it for those that currently work.
So we just need to approve the list that you have.
Yep.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve Twyla's list of clerks?
Make the motion to accept Order 2014-52 for the appointment of election clerks for June 10th, 2014 state and local election.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Order passed, 7-0. That's for a 2-year term, right?
Right.
So, okay. Next item is the council communications.
Are there any counselors who have more communication?
Nothing that wasn't already talked about, so
Right.
no, it's been covered.
Okay. And the next item, please, Twyla.
Is to adjourn. Order 2014-53.
I'll make that motion.
Pretty quick. I'll second.
All those in favor?
Order passed, 7-0.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming out tonight. I know there was a lot on the agenda.
Can't get over.
You're getting awful jumpy there, big guy.